It was interesting when I started doing this research to find out that I actually fell on that side as a teacher all along. I just didn't know it. And of course, we all apply the school rules and things like that. So what is the aim of restorative justice? The aim is to strengthen relationships, and oh, look at my spelling mistake, and manage conflict and tensions by repairing harm as a way of building community. Can you buy into that aim? The retributive approach focuses on the past, is preoccupied with blame and deterrence, and is linked to punishment. These questions kind of help us with this. Retributive justice always asks, how do we punish this offender? So in that code of conduct that we're legally obliged to have, it says, if you do X, Y will happen to you. If you do Z, A will happen to you. So if you buck, you have to have a certain, what do you call it, punishment. Right. The restorative approach focuses on the past, the present, and the future, with the emphasis on resulting harm linked or deterrence linked to relationships and personal accountability. This is very important. Consequences are an important part of restorative practice, but to be effective, they need to involve dialogue and respectful challenge. So the restorative justice asks, how do we restore the well-being of the victim, the community, and the offender? Often, the victim gets left out. The justice system carries on working with the offender, even in the school, and we don't know how the victim is dealing with this. So, how did we do this work? And I've got a big but there, because the journey began with ourselves. It began with the people that work with us in CIE and those of us who have to implement in schools. We could not go out and do this work without looking first at me. So we invited our staff to step inside the work and not let it be something that's done to teachers. When you work in our environment where you're an NGO coming in to serve in schools, you can come in as the savior and you know what's good for teachers. Well, we don't, because we need to be aware of their context, their relationships, their things. We then had staff formation in conflict management. It was part of our staff development. We had a seminar run by the Conflict Resolution Centre from Cape Town, or should I say the Centre for Conflict Resolution. And then we had a really interesting workshop with colleagues from 5 African countries as well, where we did peace building, the prototypes of the workshops we were going to take into schools. And in order to measure the climate in the schools as a type of baseline, we started the program with a climate survey of the teachers. This helped us, both us and the staff, to understand teachers' views of their own school. We only surveyed the teachers. People have said to us, but why didn't you survey the whole school? But there was a very distinct decision taken to survey the teachers only, because teachers often feel threatened and blamed for situations in their schools. And it is very important for us to work in a relational partnership with teachers rather than sit in judgment. People usually start with trying to correct a situation when things go wrong. I think I've turned the wrong page, just hang on a minute. Sorry. The feedback on the survey was taken to the staff of the schools and it enabled a conversation. One of the interesting things was the teachers really appreciated us coming back and telling them what they said. So often they ask questions, but nobody ever comes back and gives them any feedback. So, as I said, our journey began with ourselves, our own formation, prior to taking the work to the schools. All of our staff who would implement the work experienced the workshops firsthand, and this has been a very interesting part of the journey, because it surfaced in amongst ourselves exactly what it might surface in a school. Each of us comes to this discipline question from differing positions, attitudes and beliefs. We have each had our own unique experience of discipline at school and the way conflict was dealt with, or not dealt with, in our families of origin and in our communities. This affects how we deal with conflict in our own lives and how we do discipline. Professor Braxton said she would love to have us in a circle, so would I. Circles are very important in our work. It's central to how we implement our work. The circle allows for eye contact and everyone is seated at the same level. This sets the scene for the activities in which we engage, around listening and the use of I messages. Rather than saying, when you do that, I'm angry, say, I felt upset when you did that. Okay, even the second U is wrong, but I can't get into that now. Group awareness, which develops respectful relationships and sensitivity towards others. Empathy is the key to most of what we're doing. It's key to these interactions, and this helps people want to put things right. A sense of fairness and the opportunity to take responsibility. This is where the person who's the offender has to take responsibility for personal actions while speaking from my own experience. I can't speak from your experience, I only have my own experience to speak from. This all helps others to understand me. It must be emphasized that circles can be used for a myriad of other aspects in school life. Staff meetings, problem solving, class discussions. Then we've used another tool, which we call the peacemaking pyramid. It's not our own originally, and I just don't have the reference with me, but I'll put it in before I give it to Colleen. Mostly, we are trying to correct something that's gone wrong. So we start at the bottom addressing things that go wrong. However, we need to know how to help things go right. And that usually starts with me. Is my heart at peace? If I arrive in the classroom angry because my husband didn't cook me breakfast this morning, then I probably am not going to be too at peace. So I need to sort that out before I get there. Is there something creative I can do about this situation? Can I change things? Who can I approach who may have influence? There's always someone else who might have more influence than I do. Can I approach them to assist? Is there a relationship I need to build? Am I willing to learn? And what might it try to teach me? So what is this situation trying to teach me? This is a lot of personal work, but teachers have engaged with this quite positively. So we had 2 workshops, peace building and conflict management, and then we introduced the idea of restorative justice. We've developed a DVD for this purpose. It's called 6 is the Best. Okay? And it just introduces the idea, and we have some real live examples from one of our schools that have used this method of alternative dealing with discipline and restorative justice. Then we had other workshops. We then had a restorative justice workshop where they did like that questionnaire I just showed you, and then conferencing, and I'll come to conferencing in a minute. Conferencing is when you've got a serious issue that you need to deal with. But there's a continuum in implementing it in schools, because you can have informal, impromptu conversations, or you can have formal conversations. We've chosen to use what is called the scripted approach. So formal conferencing will have a facilitator and whoever, depending on the severity of the situation. It might just be something like that, or the parents might be there, or a friend, or something like that. So the facilitator prepares the parties and explains the process. Then you have the restorative conference, and I'm coming back to that, and then you have a contract, and you have follow-up. So if I harmed you, in the conference, you have to come to an agreement what will make you okay as my punishment rather than my accountability. Then you have a contract so that you stick to it. And this follow-up. The questions are the essence of this approach. What would the normal question you ask for somebody would be, if something's gone wrong, why did you do that? Why did you go off with so-and-so when you know they're a bad influence? There's no why questions here. There's what happened. What were you thinking at the time? So you try to get the offender, with whom you always start, to think. What were you thinking at the time when you bashed him on the head? He has to tell his story. What have you thought about since? Do you see where it's going? It's trying to get him to think about the consequences of his action. Maybe he's really sorry. Who's been affected by what you've done? Sometimes it can be a teacher who's been affected by someone's bad behavior. And what do you think you need to do to make things go right? So in other words, how can you fix it? Then you turn to the person who's been hurt or harmed. What did you think when you realized what happened? What impact has this had on you and others? What is the hardest thing? What do you think needs to happen to make things go right? Do you see how in depth the questions can be? If the offender doesn't like the solution, it doesn't happen. You have to get to that. It's quite a long process, and I can hear you saying that, Aurora. Where are we going to get the time to do this? I think Oscar Apollos, who's the Western Cape Department official, says that conflict resolution and restorative justice is not an event, it's a process. It's something you grow into, and the more you do it, the more it becomes second nature. Okay. Does the program work? Sorry, just let me go back up on. I'll find the other arrow here. There. Does the program work? Right now, we can certainly say it's slow work because it largely involves personal change, and it's difficult for some people to engage with change deeply. We have some anecdotal evidence that some teachers began using I language in their lives, not only in school but in their families, and some conflicts in schools have been resolved. Understanding conflict as an opportunity is not very easy to accept. We don't see conflict as an opportunity, which it is. After the first formation workshop at a school, a teacher admitted to having not talked to a colleague for 2 years and had now engaged with her. And it made her say, I don't know why I let this go on for so long. The involvement of teachers in some of the workshop activities has been enthusiastic. Teachers speak of the novelty of the setting, the circle, and the opportunity to engage in a completely different type of development. In one workshop I ran, a teacher had her cell phone in her hand, and she said, I usually go to the back table and I text the whole time the workshops are going on. Our teachers are suffering from workshop fatigue often. This time she was facing people, so she couldn't do that, so she engaged more readily. Restorative justice works best when a whole school approach is used. When implemented throughout the school, it aims to develop emotional literacy, truth-telling, accountability and responsibility. It also improves behavior, attendance, the learning environment and teaching. When well implemented, it also increases empathy, happiness, social and communication skills, and reduces bullying, conflict and the need for punishment. Leadership of this is key, as you said. But school leaders must not be the only ones to be involved. Teachers have to be involved. Possibly a lead teacher in a school who's interested in this. Doesn't have to be the principal that takes the lead. Parents also need to understand the approach. In many cases, the parents of the one offended want vengeance. Yes, it's a strong word, vengeance, but that's an attitude very present in our society, like you described with your boy with the big knife. It's about moving from fear and punishment and power over to moving to love and compassion and empathy to power with. We don't do, a basic premise of restorative justice is that people, both the learners, teachers and staff, are happier and more likely to make positive changes when those in authority, teachers, staff and leadership, do things with them rather than to them. That even goes for the department as well. We always feel they do something to the schools. We need to do things together. This movement is moving from external control to internal control, from extrinsic motivation like rewards and punishments to developing, I'm doing it because I want to do it. So as you can see, it's building responsible citizens. Alfie Cohn, a bit of a maverick educationist, said, when we repeatedly promise rewards to children for acting responsibly, or to students for making an effort to learn something new, or to employees for doing quality work, we are assuming that they could not or would not choose to act in this way on their own. So we are also learning to see how this work aligns with what's going on positively in schools. Being invitational is very important for us. We can't force the program on anyone. And by being relational, as I said earlier, we develop relationships with the staff. Further learnings are that while some of us and the teachers we work with have carried the peacekeeping and conflict management skills introduced to us, it's difficult sometimes for people to really embrace it. So we have a long way to go in our journey. The code of conduct that you mentioned must be aligned to this process. You can't have a code of conduct that is purely punitive without it being aligned. We've developed resources to go with the program. We have a book. It's called Fairness for All, Doing Discipline Differently. It has more in it than, this is just, what I've talked about today is just one chapter. It's got other things. One of the things as teachers you'll be interested in is self-care. If we care for ourselves more, we're more able to cope with the stresses in life.